Inspiration sparks and raises our vibration, encouraging all of us to live our best lives. And it is my pleasure to welcome our speaker this evening, Jen Rosson. Jen is an ordained minister and endeavors to be an inspiration to those she serves. She is the Vice President of SCOA and the Director of Spiritual Expression Center. A warm harmony welcome to Jen.
By the late Dr. Wayne Dyer. A well-known self-help and motivational speaker, he was the author of over 20 best-selling books, many of which focused on different aspects of individual spirituality. This article is titled Forgiveness. Forgiveness is the most powerful thing that you can do for your physiology and your spirituality. And it remains one of the least attractive things to us, largely because our egos rule so unequivocally. To forgive is somehow associated with saying that it is all right, that we accept the evil deed. But this is not forgiveness. Forgiveness means that you fill yourself with love and you radiate that love outward and refuse to hang on to the venom or hatred that was engendered by the behaviors that caused the wounds. Forgiveness is a spiritual act of love for yourself, and it sends a message to everyone, including yourself, that you are an object of love, and that is what you're going to import. This is the process of unbonding from old wounds and no longer hanging on to them as prized possessions. It means letting go of the language of blame and self-pity and no longer leading with one's wounds and injuries from the past. It means privately forgiving and not asking anyone else to understand. It means leaving behind the eye for an eye attitude that only makes for more pain and the need for more revenge, and replacing it with an attitude of love and forgiveness. The spiritual literature available to us from all religious persuasions honors this way. Feeling worthy is essential to being able to stay rooted in what you most deeply value. It is simply a matter of common sense. If you don't feel that you deserve something, why would the divine energy that is in all things send it your way? Thus, you must shift to knowing that you and the divine energy are one and the same, and that it is your ego that is conniving to keep you from knowing the power of this in your own life. Well, good afternoon or good evening or wherever it may be, whatever it may be, wherever you are. It's good to see everybody at our gathering today. You may not know that last Friday, September 27th, was an important day on the calendar. It was the National Day of Forgiveness, a day set aside to remind us to consciously incorporate forgiveness into our lives. The idea of forgiveness can mean different things to different people. And this act of releasing feelings of resentment or retaliation comes with a lot of emotional and spiritual soul searching during the process. It doesn't mean that the words or the actions of another are forgotten or condoned. And many times it ends up being more beneficial for the one doing the actual forgiving than for the one being forgiven. You know, some of these Sunday talks seem to write themselves, flowing from the keyboard with wild abandon. Others are a bit trickier. Even when you know what your topic should be, sometimes it's much more difficult to address. And this is one of those troublesome ones for me. And there does seem to be a correlation between difficulty, subject matter, and how close it hits to home. So thankfully, Spirit is not only a patient collaborator, but a great source of solace as well. I have been reminded of late through the struggles of some folks that I care about of the toll the COVID pandemic has caused for many of us. The social distancing, homeschooling, stay-at-home orders, and all the other impacts on not only our physical well-being, but also on our mental well-being. We humans are social creatures, and the enforced isolation of so many in our population resulted in all kinds of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual issues. Many of us were forced to confront problems that we had long ago buried, or maybe we ignored them or flat out denied that they existed. The seismic effects of the virus are still being felt throughout our population, magnifying what would be the normal day-to-day tremors of our human society. All of us accumulate baggage over this process of living a physical existence. Suitcases filled with unresolved conflicts and the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. This luggage comes in all shapes and sizes, some contents weighing us down more than others. A one-liner going around during the stay-at-home phase of the pandemic went like, I had to tell my suitcases there was no vacation this year due to the COVID-19. Now I have emotional baggage. But seriously, this baggage we all carry can be such a burden that it can cripple our ability to live our lives to their fullest potential. It can affect every interaction, every decision, every part of our everyday life. A 19th century mystic, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, had a very favorite story that he told all of his students. A man carrying a heavy bag across his shoulders was running to catch a train as it was pulling out of the station. He caught it just in time, swinging aboard with his heavy bag, and soon discovered that all the seats were taken. So he stood leaning against the doorway into the car, bent under the weight of the bag across his shoulders. One of his fellow passengers asked if he wanted to put the bag down to be more comfortable, and he became very defensive, refusing to part with the bag for a moment, even though the passenger had offered to make room for it. Our emotional baggage is not a modern day invention, nor exclusive to our Western society. This 19th century Bengali mystic recognized that we are only burdened by those things and attachments that we choose to carry with us. What we accumulate over time weighs us down and bends our backs under the burden of unresolved anger and fear. My personal experience with my very own nice matched set of mental, emotional, and spiritual baggage stemmed from what may now seem to be a somewhat cliche experience, one of those old school horrendous coming out confessions that went south quickly, culminating in my biological mother disowning me and alienating the rest of our small family from me. I know when I see these events depicted in movies and TV shows now, they typically come to some eventual resolution of acceptance or understanding. It was a very different world some 45 years ago, and those screenwriters had not yet met my mother. Formidable and judgmental is an understatement. There wasn't a happy ending in our story. I had been cast adrift, feeling orphaned and alone. Most everyone is familiar with the old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Remember that? Hearing that as a kid? It's not really accurate, though, is it? Words can leave scars just as easily as the mightiest sword. And those wounds can fester and remain unhealed no matter what salve you apply. I spent about 10 years being very angry and bitter. This was also the decade in my life that I proclaimed myself an avowed atheist. Probably not a coincidence. I was hurt so badly that I lost trust and faith in anything or anyone. I became fearful and built walls to protect myself going forward. But when you do that, the past becomes the future, doesn't it? Perhaps you have a moment in your past that can, help you relate to what I'm saying. We can become our own worst enemy, a hostage to our mental and emotional wounds. When that much hurt and bitterness is carried around, there's not much room left for more positive expressions like love and grace. Eventually, I gained enough life experience and maturity to realize that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life lugging around this weight every day. I started to unpack my suitcases a little at a time, with a lot of help from friends and found family. The secret to lightening this load is forgiveness. It doesn't happen in an instant, but once you have given forgiveness an intention and a voice, it gradually sneaks up on you. It happens in stealth mode, in between moments in time, like unpacking one pair of socks from a suitcase at a time. Only it's one instant of forgiveness at a time. Eventually, one day, the sun comes up like every other morning, and you realize that you're not mad anymore. You have forgiven that person or action. Forgiveness has snuck in like a ninja. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison for his role in fighting apartheid in South Africa. In his memoir, he wrote that when he was released, as he was walking out of the gate that would lead to his freedom, he knew that if he didn't leave his bitterness and hatred behind, he would still be in prison. When we forgive, we set the prisoner free, and we are that prisoner. With each act of forgiveness, we change the world a little at a time, and we heal the world a little at a time. Christian writer Corrie ten Boom said, "Forgiveness is the key that unlocks the door of resentment and the handcuffs of hatred. It is a power that breaks the chains of bitterness and the shackles of selfishness." What a wonderful world we would have if everyone put down their baggage and their agendas of fear and retribution and revenge. If only we were all willing to work on forgiveness and accept being forgiven in equal measure, we could move mountains together. I was fortunate to have had many people along the way that helped me unpack and walk this path of forgiveness. I'm eternally grateful to all of them. And during the pandemic, I gained a new appreciation of just how gracious their gift of guidance was. One of the many, many nursing home casualties of COVID was my 85-year-old biological mother. By her choice, we had not spoken or seen each other for over 40 years. I was and am able to grieve her death because of the forgiveness journey that helped me shed the burden of her rejection all those years ago. And I'm free to mourn what our life might have been like without recrimination or bitterness. Forgiveness is like that. Forgiveness can restore faith. It can open doors of a shuttered heart. It can allow the expression of love in full measure. Forgiveness is like a parachute for our soul. It allows us to float slowly back to center, letting go of the past, freeing us from worry about the future, and grounding us in this present moment. Speaking of parachutes, I came across a joke that I can't help but share. Sam's a pilot for an airline, and he was walking through the airport on his way to his next flight, wheeling his luggage along behind him. He also wore a small backpack that held his running clothes. He was in uniform, so he wasn't surprised when people smiled and grinned at him. He was quite proud of being a pilot. It wasn't until he got on the plane and took off his backpack that he noticed the parachute sign a coworker had snuck onto it. We may all get sidetracked or even blindsided from time to time on this physical plane, much like our experience of the pandemic. It's all part of our human journey. Our responsibility is to remember to pack one of the most important items we can carry: forgiveness. A little parachute that doesn't weigh much, but it is literally a lifesaver, and it's reusable. Thank you for your kind attention today, and blessings to all.